speaker is Mr. Searle. Mr. Searle is the Manager, Government, Community and Aboriginal Relations for Imperial Oil Limited. He is based in Calgary, Alberta. He has very broad responsibilities for overseeing the interface between Imperial and key federal, provincial and territorial government officials, and for supporting the engagement with resident communities, including those located near Imperial's operations, new opportunity areas, Aboriginal communities, and non-operating surplus sites. Searle and his team provide leadership in a number of areas, including strategic planning, implementation on advocacy, issues of management and public policies, as well as community outreach, Aboriginal consultation, and relationship management. He is also Vice President of the Imperial Oil Foundation, the company's charitable arm, and he is a member of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers Aboriginal Affairs Committee and the Council on Corporate Aboriginal Relations. Searle also supports Imperial's relationship with Inspire, Canada's largest non-governmental funding body for Indigenous students. Searle.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marie, for that kind introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to be here with you all, and I'm so happy that I could come from Calgary with Hope Henderson and bring warmer weather to Ottawa. I understand that you've been having a bit of a winter here, so with that, I did want to mention I'm a rare breed at Imperial. I'm a public affairs lifer. My 30-plus year career with Imperial has all been in public affairs. And I've pretty much done every job you can do in a public affairs organization. That was up until about 2008 when I was asked to take on more of a leadership role in Aboriginal relations. And it was an area that I had not been directly involved in before. And it's been a great experience. It's been a great experience doing it within a company like IBM that was mentioned earlier. We've been around in Canada for more than 130 years. We have a long shared relationship with Canada's Indigenous people. And yet, since I started in that portfolio and right up to today, I continue to be struck by just how many of my fellow employees, how many of my friends and even family members really have no context for or understanding of Aboriginal people in Canada. And they often talk to me about this. They're quite intrigued by the work that I do. And I ask them if they, in their day-to-day lives, have interactions with Aboriginal people. And most often than not, the answer is no. And so I think that while the good news is they're very interested in understanding more, I think it's incumbent on all of us to really reach out to create greater connections, to create greater understanding, so that we can hope to move forward and echo some of Stephen's words in healing and progress. With a high density of Aboriginal peoples living in and around our operating areas, we recognize the considerable opportunity presented by the growing population of Canada's Aboriginal people, especially the younger demographic. We've heard a lot about that today. And the ever-increasing importance of the Aboriginal business has been playing as a strong growth component of Canada's economy. According to the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, Aboriginal entrepreneurs now contribute some $13 billion to the Canadian economy. That's significant, very significant, but I think collectively we can do better in terms of increasing prosperity more broadly. I believe all of us here recognize the tremendous potential First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people represent. Unlocking that potential in ways that align with the aspirations of Aboriginal communities, businesses, and individuals, and make sense for the private sector is exciting, but not without its challenges. Now, given these business and social responsibility imperatives, Imperial created its Aboriginal Relations Guiding Principles and Guidelines in 2008. And these guiding principles provide structure to what we call our four-pillar approach to Aboriginal relations, which are consultation, workforce development, business development, and community relations, which encompasses community investment. And since these guiding principles were created, the company has seen demonstrable improvement in all four focus areas. Today I'll talk about a few examples from various projects, operations, and corporate initiatives that describe how the company has engaged and supported Aboriginal employees and communities in achieving a measure of prosperity and some of the challenges that we've faced. And I hope this is helpful to the conversation we're having today. A few examples of the improvements we've experienced since our guiding principles were implemented. We've increased our Aboriginal workforce from 1.8% to 3.5% as a percentage of our total employee workforce between 2009 and 2013. We established 4 new Aboriginal networks at the company's head office and operating sites to promote best practice information sharing and to create a more supportive workplace environment by increasing awareness of Aboriginal culture and sensitivities. We also increased our total company Aboriginal business spend from 91 million Canadian dollars in 2009 to more than $430 million in 2014, and we nearly tripled the company's corporate contributions to Aboriginal initiatives since 2009. In terms of increasing our Aboriginal workforce, what we like to do is work with communities to understand what the capacity and capabilities are of its current workforce, and then see what opportunities may be available to provide access to training, education, and scholarships currently funded by Imperial. At our heavy oil operation at Cold Lake, Alberta, which has been in production since the mid-1980s, we started a group of Aboriginal employees in 1991 came together dedicated to creating stronger relationships between the operation and local First Nation and Métis communities, and they came together to form what's called the Imperial Aboriginal Network. Now in 1998, this network, the members of it, formed the Aboriginal Internship Program. And since inception, this program has helped to increase the number of Aboriginal employees from about 3% to 12% of our Cold Lake total workforce of about 400 employees. The internship program is much more than your typical practicum or work experience placement program. It's an intensive and comprehensive 24-month training program. Interns are trained for highly technical and complex positions at the company. Each intern is assigned a trainer as well as a mentor from the network who also serves as a role model for the mentees. Over time, this internship program has demonstrated continued success in Aboriginal employee development and retention. Some 74% of the Aboriginal interns that were offered full-time employment through this program are still with the company today. In May 2014, our Cold Lake operation began posting and communicating employment and related opportunities within neighboring communities. These include employment opportunities directly with our company and through our 10 major contractors, as well as additional information on topics such as scholarships, new graduate recruitment initiatives, or other programs. This listing is currently distributed monthly to a total of 16 First Nation and Métis communities and Métis settlements and a number of Aboriginal associations. Now, the idea behind this was to go beyond just communicating what specific jobs are available. The intent was also to heighten awareness of the opportunities in our industry, what qualifications are required, and what education and employment options are accessible, as well as opening up lines of communications with communities. We really view this as a shared responsibility with our communities, and they've responded in that fashion. And since inception, we've expanded the distribution significantly due to positive word of mouth, and we've had really strong and encouraging feedback. I'll just talk a little bit about scholarships and training. Our main scholarship program is carried out in partnership with Inspire. Marie described Inspire earlier. And over the past 7 years, we've sponsored nearly 150 Aboriginal students in university and college programs. Beginning in 2013, the company increased its available funding for this program by more than 30% to $100,000 a year and added a trades and technology component for oil and gas. Regional Aboriginal scholarship programs for junior high and high school students are also in place at our company operations across Canada, including Cold Lake, Norman Wells, and Southern Ontario. And one of the company's significant challenges is attracting and retaining Aboriginal employees, and I probably put the emphasis more on retention. The company believes that an important part of the solution lies in creating a more supportive work environment. To that end, we've provided cultural awareness training to employees and contractors across the country. For example, at our oil sands mining operation in Alberta's Wood Buffalo region, more than 1,700 employees and contractors have received training to date. And we always ensure that the training is developed and delivered by Aboriginal people. In 2013, the company established an Aboriginal employee network at its Calgary head office. This network is open to all employees, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, and the network was really created as a local support and networking system for Aboriginal employees that promotes an inclusive work environment. Since inception, this network has hosted a variety of cultural awareness sessions, Aboriginal arts and crafts trade shows, and arranged for interested employees to experience various ceremonies such as smudging and participating in a sweat lodge. Aboriginal business. We recognize that Aboriginal business is fundamentally important to sustaining a healthy Canadian economy, and many of the other speakers today have touched on that. My company and many others in the oil and gas sector actively engage with these businesses for the goods and services we need to support our projects and operations. And by doing so, we help Aboriginal communities by fostering entrepreneurship and creating employment. Over the past 7 years, Imperial has spent nearly $1.6 billion on goods and services from Aboriginal companies. At Cold Lake, Searle, and Norman Wells, the company continues to build relationships with Aboriginal suppliers. These operations require prime contractors, so we make sure that the large contracting companies that are working on our behalf facilitate opportunities for local and Aboriginal businesses to participate wherever possible. These services include site surveying, clearing and grading, log hauling, scaffolding, drilling camp operations, aviation services, reclamation, and on the list goes. Lastly, community investment. We invest in community education and training programs that support the aspirations of Aboriginal peoples across the country. As noted earlier, a priority is supporting education and training initiatives that provide Aboriginal peoples with the skills needed to further their careers in industry or leadership roles within their communities. Now, I'd like to highlight just one specific example that we fund. It's called the Indigenous Women in Community Leadership Program, or IWCL. The goal of this program is to engage the next generation of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit women leaders and provide them with practical leadership skills and experiences so that they can promote community development from within. Offered since 2011 by the Coady International Institute at St. Francis Xavier University in Nova Scotia, this program has graduated 62 aspiring leaders to date. Your moderator today, Marie Delorme, is a program advisor and mentor, and she has made a significant contribution to the success of this program. The IWCL program is the only full scholarship program of its kind in Canada that gives Aboriginal women leaders the opportunity to receive focused training and work on a community development project of their choice over a 3-month period. These projects form a diverse portfolio of work that is recognized as important by these Aboriginal women leaders and their respective communities, and helps them put into practice what they have learned. If you're interested in learning more about this program, you can speak with myself or Marie or access the Coady Institute website. So to conclude, and I think it's obvious by all of the discussion today, there is no silver bullet that will ensure Aboriginal economic prosperity. And prosperity is obviously much more than dollars and cents. The achievements I think that the private sector and other sectors have made today have been hard won. Building for greater success will require an even greater collaborative effort from Aboriginal representatives, from the private sector, from government, and from educators. There are challenges, to be sure, but there are solutions, and I think we can find them. Finding them, however, will require all of us to roll up our sleeves and continue to innovate. This will require understanding and commitment, and I believe a willingness to step out of our traditional roles or traditional boxes or paradigms and actively work together on making meaningful, sustainable progress towards achieving Aboriginal prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hart. Namir Anani is the President and CEO of the Information and Communications Technology Council. He is the Chief Strategist and driving force in bringing this organization's world-class center of expertise and services to industry, education, and government, enabling Canada's advancement as a leader in innovation, productivity in the global economy. Before joining ICTC, Anani previously led policy development and research at the CRTC. He also held several executive leadership roles in both the private and public sectors. In the Department of Canadian Heritage, he was the Director General and CEO, CGI Consulting, Nortel, and Novartis out of Switzerland. His experience extends to strategic policy development and implementation, learning and capacity development, business transformation, national and international strategic alliances, economic and market research, and technology innovation. Namir Anani.
Good afternoon. First of all, I didn't realize that we sent you the long bio here for that. I was hoping we'd go with the shorter one, but thank you for this. You know, it would be a remiss if I don't start by thanking the organizers of this conference for making such an interactive and providing such a diversity of views in the discussion. So it's not always easy to do that, so I thank you for this. You know, my presentation will be short. I'll be speaking particularly as it relates to the talent in an increasingly and rapid digital economy that's shaping around us, both nationally and internationally. You know, and I was hoping to give you some of the dimensions and maybe conclude at the end with some potential solutions that we can look at. Let me start by saying it's fair to say that in the last number of years we've seen unprecedented economic growth, both on a national and international level, that is made primarily by you know, technology that's becoming the essence of any high-performing economy, such as ours, in an increasingly global and very competitive environment. And increasingly also as we open up our doors internationally and expand our trade. We spoke about trade, you know, earlier in the discussion. You know, Canada has signed an agreement with Europe, the Comprehensive European Trade Agreement, opening the doors to approximately 500 million population with several innovations and technologies that are coming. But we have to equip our organizations going forward with the right talent and the right technologies to be able to compete in that environment going forward. But let me, before I start to talk about digital economy and others, let me give you a feel of who we are as an organization so you have an understanding where some of the data I will be presenting come from. So at a high level, we are a national center of expertise. Our main aim is to help inform Canadians and build their capacity as citizens, as consumers, and as industry to help them better leverage the digital economy. So how do we do that? We do a lot of technology research to try to figure out where the world is going. I always say we don't boil the ocean in all technology research. So we pick the technologies with the highest impact on job creation and economic growth. For instance, I'll talk about that later. We've done some work with Google on the apps economy, trying to understand how many people employed in that arena. We also do a lot of labor market data. In fact, we are the entrusted organization for doing the labor market for the digital economy. But we also do some talent programs as well, where we have programs that start from as early as schools, right to colleges and universities, but also we're working increasingly with the industry in terms of upskilling because in such a fast pace of technology, we need to make sure that the industry is able to upskill. And specifically, an industry, if you look at the composition of Canada's industry, is one of very small and micro enterprises. In fact, you know, it was a surprise to me when I took over this organization to realize that Canada's industry is represented by, 75% is represented by, you know, organizations of less than 10 employees. So they have their own dimensions and their own needs in competing in that environment. And I'll speak to that going forward. But we also provide policy advice from education, economic, and others. So let me touch on what is the potential for the, you know, the digital economy in Canada. So it's an economy that employs currently approximately 1.1 million Canadians. That you know, the demand for jobs outweighs the supply by far. In fact, you know, we will be releasing a report in Monday of next week, where we highlight, I won't give you the exact figures because my staff will be very unhappy with it, but over 170,000 critical jobs that we're going to require by, you know, in 5 years because of the impending fast-paced economy that's happening in the digital arena, because technology cuts across every sector of the economy, from health, banking, manufacturing, you name it, on that. That the unemployment level is around 2.4%. To give you an idea, anything in economic terms below 4%, they call it full employment. So 2.4% is everybody starving for talent. They try to look for that talent in that arena. In fact, our recent report that we published indicate that in 2014, job growth in the digital economy was 4 times that of any other sector in the Canadian economy. So it shows you where potentially we can focus in terms of the jobs of the future in that arena. What's taking shape in terms of technology? So you have a feel of what is happening, what are the competencies and needs and so forth. I think IBM spoke to some of them earlier, but there is a buzzword called SMAC technologies, which is social, mobile, analytics, apps, and cloud. When you think about it, all these technologies, in one way or another, without you even reflecting on it, as you wake up in the morning using some of those technologies, from the apps to the mobile to other capabilities. But what's, you know, the profound aspect that's happening in our economy is that more and more we're doing payments using mobile devices. In fact, you know, in the past, there was a term called, a digital platform called fintech, which is the privy of the banking sector. Financial technologies or fintech has evolved and become very democratized. You can go to the Apple Store, buy a small card, insert it in your mobile device, and be able to accept credit card payment at the point of sale. That was never available, not even a couple of years ago. In fact, the technology changes such a fast pace. I was sitting at the table, we were discussing, we were, you know, putting hypotheses. When was the first iPad launched? And we were thinking maybe it's 10 years, 12 years. And then I Googled it, it was April 3rd, 2010. So it gives you an idea how fast this world is changing and how many iPads we've changed so far in that environment. It's also touching on many other sectors. So the health sector, for instance, we talked about it earlier, but you know, can you imagine when we're sitting, a lot of our information now are stored in servers within the doctor's offices or the health practitioners. If that information was available on the cloud, meaning available to all, you'll be able to do much more analytics and research by understanding the effect of medication on the larger population or the effect of immunization on the larger population. You know, interestingly, I was in Europe on holiday in France a year ago with my wife. She wanted some headache medication. We walked in the first pharmacy. She asked us, can I see your mobile device? We said, why do you want to see mobile? Oh, to interrogate the effect of medication. I said, we don't have that. So she said, do you have a card that I can insert in my system too? You know, we don't have that. We're in Canada, you know, we don't have the system. But it shows you that the world is advancing at such a fast pace. There is a lot for us to catch on that. And digital adoption is not happening to that level that we think it should be. And primarily, and I expand on that because there is a knowledge agenda and talent agenda that plays an aspect of it. But technology is touching on the financial sector, it's touching on the health sector, it's touching on the automation and robotics sector primarily as well, and manufacturing. It's touching on even the connected cars. You know, there are a lot of, you know, most cars that are being built now are connected one way or another to the internet. More and more that's happening, and the high-end cars in Europe, you'll find if one car hits an ice patch somewhere, it will communicate to another car in a social network. Within half a kilometer says, beware of those coordinates, there is an ice patch happening. So it alerts the driver. What's interesting is the insurance companies are coming in the game and saying, well, hey, if there is that capability, maybe we'll offer you better insurance as a result. And in fact, they're offering you, if you put a chip in your car that they know exactly where you're driving and how speed you drive, they offer you better insurance. So new business models are taking shape. And you may have heard that in the next number of years, you know, technology is taking a whole new dimension, something called the Internet of Things, because of the connectivity. I mean, Cisco's announced recently that there will be 50 billion connected devices, that the Internet of Things will be a $9 trillion economy in the world, that we really in Canada need to take part of that. We need to equip ourselves to grab this market. And when I talked about the apps economy earlier, you know, it was interesting to me when we did the first research on the apps economy about 1.5 years ago, I didn't realize, having come from industries that are, you know, some of the larger industries like the Bells and Rogers of this world, that, you know, I found that there were about 55,000 people employed in Canada working on apps, and I said, I can't figure that out, because are they developing 99-cent apps? How are they making money out of that? Then realize that 80% of those companies, they're 4 or 5 employees, they're not generating billions, they're generating millions of dollars, very entrepreneurial. They're developing enterprise apps for banks in Indonesia and Japan, for the health sector, again in Asia and others, because it's a connected environment. All they have to do is set up shop and simply be able to develop these capabilities going forward. So let's come to, you know, we put a high level in terms of the technology and where it's shaping, and maybe, you know, just before I jump off that ship of the Internet of Things, if you think, well, this is way too complex and is it really happening or not, just go to your corner, you know, Home Depot, and you probably buy a Nest thermostat. That Nest thermostat is a self-learning, self-adaptive thermostat. It's connected to the internet through your Wi-Fi. I've installed one, being in the technology domain, and then realized all of a sudden, it's starting to ask me questions. Do you want to connect to Ontario Hydro? Would you allow me to set your temperature? In fact, I haven't even programmed it. It programmed itself based on habits and expectations. But if you think about it in the future, in the smart cities, your traffic is going to work with the first responders. Your grid is going to work with your buildings and businesses to manage electricity consumption. Your cars will work with the traffic lights. And that's not a dream. This is actually a reality that's taking shape at the moment. And that's what's creating some of the jobs, and those jobs in the future. So what is the potential for us to go forward? As I mentioned, if the job creation is approximately 4-to-1 compared to other sectors, and that, in my prediction and the prediction of my organization, is going to ramp up in the next number of years, is that we have to work on 2 levels. If I could put some solutions on the table and conclude with that. One is that we have to build the talent supply. And how do we do the talent supply? I think we have to start very early, and we heard that from schooling. We as an organization have started basically working with schools a number of years ago, and we actually provincially approved in 200 schools where we attract students in grade 11 and 12 to get them into ICT careers. And we're seeing some tremendous growth in that arena and potential success as well going forward, because 89% of those that graduate from that, and we've been able to engage in industry as part of this program. Why? Because it provides some visibility in vocational training. They've been able to go into future careers, into colleges, universities, and then have engagement with the industry and get jobs. So the talent has to be started early to engage them in those careers. But it's important also to have the right bridging program. So when they graduate, they were able to provide them the capabilities, and specifically since most of our industry is small, medium enterprises, we have to find a mechanism to help those small, medium enterprises hire. So wage subsidies, a mechanism of that, to hire those for at least 3 to 4 months, because all indications is that if small enterprises hire graduates, more potential is that we'll have face time and we'll have opportunity to employ. But knowing that, youth, Aboriginal youth demographics is the highest growing demographics in Canada, I can't help but think, why aren't we acting on that? With youth unemployment at 12.8%, according to the latest data that we have, which is double that of the national average, and Aboriginal youth unemployment is higher, as we've heard, we should start planning how to build the talent supply as early as possible, engage them into careers that are high paying and plentiful in that arena. And yes, there is the other dimension of this, apart from the talent supply, is how do we continuously upskill the talent within the industry. But that's a whole dimension that we started to build. In fact, we launched a site recently called Digital Adoption Compass, or digcompass.ca. I encourage you to have a look at it, because it provides you some learning tools of what are those technologies that I just talked about are providing. Let me conclude on something. So I think the talent supply is important, but one thing we're doing in the next couple of weeks, and I encourage you to do that, provide it to your community, is that with all the labor market data that we provided, primarily in the past that were provided to policymakers and economists, we wanted to democratize that information. We actually created a site, I think first in Canada, potentially around the world, where we will provide interactive data for an average Canadian. If I'm looking for a specific job in Ottawa, I'll have an understanding who's hiring, how many jobs are there. If I'm looking for data analytics, are there 3 jobs or 30 jobs? What is the level of education they're looking for? What salaries are they paying, wages? And based on that, if I don't have the exact education, where can I go from the supply side, meaning the educational side, to get that training? And apply for jobs at the same time. It's not a job site, it's more insights for Canadians, insights for policymakers, insights for the industry to come up and say, well, where do I establish? I mean, we get calls constantly, organizations saying, well, where do I get X talent? Is it better in Quebec? Or is better in Manitoba or others? And which cities and which provinces? That site, it's called etalentcanada.ca. I encourage you to have a look at it in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be happy to send you more information on that. I'll stop here. Look forward to some of the discussions and the debate on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Namir. Patricia Stirbys is the National Aboriginal Services Lead with AECOM. She brings over 17 years of experience in law, communications, policy, university teaching, and management. She has an excellent understanding of Aboriginal peoples, the issues and the challenges, along with a broad understanding in industry of mining, renewable energy, oil and gas, and construction. She has engaged with Aboriginal communities in most provinces and has successfully negotiated agreements with Aboriginal groups across Northern Ontario, particularly First Nations communities who are located within the Ring of Fire. She advises clients on the consultation process, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal business partnerships, and Aboriginal employment, training, and retention. Ms. Stirbys' goal is to keep hope alive in all Aboriginal communities. Patricia Stirbys.
Thank you very much, Marie. Do I tell them that I wasn't quite prepared to do it? Thank you, everyone, for being here today. What I mean by to keep hope alive in all Aboriginal communities is that, when I talk to or meet with communities, whether I talk to the chief, councillor, the ECDEV person, or the receptionist, I always ask them, what do you want to do? What would you want to do if you weren't doing what you're doing now? And I also talk to them, I'm usually going up on behalf of a client, and I talk to them about, what are the potential opportunities, for their communities with one mining company, for example. So sometimes you've got Aboriginal communities that are divided on whether or not they want to have a mining project within their traditional territory. And so I'm always, talking to them one way or the other. I don't push them, say you absolutely must, you've got to, and push them into meeting with the company, but it's really to, say what are the opportunities. And I know from all of my conversations that the mothers in the community want to see youth employed, the youth want to be employed, and it's just to, and even some of the elders are saying we want to see, more, I like the word prosperity and success, and however you define it, within their communities. What I do with AECOM, in addition to some of my outside clients, is Aboriginal consultation. And through that consultation process, I have a chance to meet and talk with a lot of our Aboriginal people. Whether we're talking to the Inuit folks, the Métis, First Nation across Canada, there is a lot of anticipation, I think, about what can potentially happen with the mining sector or other sectors across Canada. So in the Aboriginal consultation process, since we're talking about prosperity, and Namir talked about employment, and we've got a number of stats that came out of both Hart and Namir's presentations. I think through the negotiation process, that conversation through Aboriginal consultation, it's always to encourage employment. It's to encourage the companies actually to employ our Aboriginal people at the very earliest opportunity. If they're just starting out, it's to hire young people to just be line cutters. Let's just start there. Let's get people used to working if they haven't worked in a long time. Let's give them a 2-week job if that's all there is at the moment. And it's to, then educate, talk to, encourage even the leadership to understand that, that 2-week job can lead to a 4-week job, can lead to a 6-month job. And then as the projects get bigger, so do the opportunities for employment. I think through my work, whether I've been, teaching at the university or in my position as an Aboriginal consultation person with mining, construction, or other, I think it's important for us to think about our roles wherever we work. And it's to encourage the people within our organizations to hire more people when we can, to train, but also I think to encourage any of the clients and the people that we, the folks outside our organization, to encourage them to hire more Aboriginal people. I know even now joining AECOM, my role is to build a strong Aboriginal consultation team. And I got a number of CVs sent to me, and every time they send one to me, I'd say, are they Aboriginal? Are they Aboriginal? Are they Aboriginal? And so I keep letting them know that I want to hire an Aboriginal team in the Aboriginal consultation. It's not because I want to, oh, it says Aboriginal in the title, so we should have all Aboriginal people. But I think that there's, a lot of our Aboriginal folks have an understanding of the communities that they come from and the areas that they come from, the provinces. There's a difference in understanding, from some of the Métis from the south compared to the Inuit who live, in the far, far north. And so part of my role in my company is to talk to my colleagues to do presentations, which, I joined them 5 months ago. So I've got a list of things that I want to do, and some of those things include doing, not cross-cultural presentations, but doing the presentations and talking about who we are as Aboriginal people across Canada, what some of our aspirations are, you know, what we would like to see, and having them understand who we are, so that there's more of a comfort, I think, around us, because I don't know if other folks work in Aboriginal consultation out there, but I've found that companies will come to me and they're really unsure. What do I do? How do I talk to them? And I said, well, how would you talk to anybody? How would you want to build a relationship with anyone? If you want to ask someone out on a date, you wouldn't come to me. You'd probably, pick up the phone, or you'd approach them at an event and you would say, hey, this is me. Would you like to go for a coffee? Or, just talk a little bit about each other. And so I encourage that kind of thing. It's really easy to me. Aboriginal consultation is really just a conversation. And yeah, you're going to bump heads with the chief or council or elders, but I think it's important just to keep going and continue having the conversation, because I think we often fear that thing that we don't know. And so by further, picking up the phone, sending emails, and continuing a conversation, no matter what stage a project is at, I think it's really important just to communicate. And I keep encouraging this to all of the companies that I deal with. I talk to all of my colleagues and just say, this is what it is. Because they'll say, Patricia, we got this email and it sounds like they're really mad. And I said, well, so why don't you just pick up the phone? And they're kind of stunned, like they're afraid. Oh, I think they sound really mad. So we'll just pick up the phone and ask them what they would like, because I think oftentimes there's a misunderstanding, or there needs to be further education about the project, and these are the boundaries of the project, etc. So I think that's the kind of thing that we have to talk about to clients and just people all around us. Talk about your friendships, and just keep encouraging people to talk. And so employment is also another issue that comes up whenever I negotiate any of the agreements on behalf of my clients. Employment is a big issue. Employment, business opportunities, and so any chance you get, it's always, just ask a question to organizations. I did a presentation in Vancouver maybe a year and a half ago, and I asked that person, how many Aboriginal people have you hired? And her face kind of went blank, and she said, I'm embarrassed to say, she said, I haven't hired any. I haven't even thought about it. And it's a whole, ready, set, go pool of talent. And so no matter what, just ask and have people think about Aboriginal talent. So I think through that, what we did talk about then was to let's create a company where we have, a number of Aboriginal designers. So that's still a work in progress. And as far as Aboriginal businesses, I know that, mining is something that I've been involved with a lot in the last 5 years, so a lot of my examples come from there. So elements of our negotiated agreements will often, and all do now, have working with the Aboriginal businesses. And so when I talk to the communities, I ask them what kind of businesses they have, and if they don't have any, then I'm looking to, to encourage partnerships. Because I wouldn't want someone to start a camp development company or some other kind of company, and then they're kind of set to fail because they don't quite know how to run the company. So I'm a big encourager of partnerships. Whether you want to build a hotel, get a partnership. If you want to start a camp development, start a helicopter company or something like that. Within the mining sector, there's a lot of opportunities, and you see right now that there are companies have exploded within the First Nation communities up north. So they've caught on to all the opportunities, business opportunities that there are within the mining sector, and so those communities who are a little bit slower to respond, they keep watching as companies or or as their neighbor communities sign up with different companies, and then they see the different opportunities that they have coming to them. And so I see the slow movement then of those who haven't been quick to jump and sign agreements. They're slowly moving toward their own agreements and also business partnerships. So I'm very much interested in hearing what your questions are and to responding to those. I'm often known by my friends as an idea person. So what kind of opportunities are there? Well, there's lots of opportunities, and I think that whenever we're up north or we're down south, look at what you have around you. If you're up north, there's food is expensive. Let's talk about greenhouses, and let's encourage the companies that we work with to partner with the First Nation on developing a greenhouse. There's lots of different opportunities, and I think it depends a little bit on where you're located as well. But I'll leave it there, and I'll encourage you just ask as many questions as we've got time for, and we'd be very interested in hearing them.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I said to Patricia, never tell people that you came unprepared, because they never really know that. You just sound like you know what you're talking about. So we do have about half an hour until the break. Wonderful opportunity to engage in discussion. And the microphones are live. So microphone 2 at the back. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Sunshine Tanasco, and I work with the Native Women's Association of Canada. And I run a project called the Aboriginal Women's Business Entrepreneurship Network, AWBN for short. It just caught my attention. Nimir said something about bridging organization and then keeping the hope alive. That kind of struck out at me. I guess my question is for everybody here. I'm kind of hearing it from showing up here today is a little different from what I expected. I'm not really sure what I expected, but there's a lot of people looking into Aboriginal organizations as opposed to Aboriginal organizations coming together to speak about their perspective. So my question is, what's your definition of a successful bridging organization? Because I want to be that person. I want to be that organization, and if you can kind of give me a clue as to what's going to help me, then I'm totally down with helping you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sunshine. Great question. Who would like to take that? Your definition of a successful bridging organization.
So basically, can you hear me?
Could we put this mic live, please? These two at the front.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So as an organization, we do a lot of bridging programs, and they range from a couple of months to much longer period in time, where we provide coaching, mentoring. At times it's internship with the industry, where the industry has a mechanism of providing first-line experience to the graduates coming into the industry. Because at the end of the day, we always talk about the skills gap, and we can't find the right talent. The responsiveness of the educational system vis-a-vis specifically to the industry that I represent is such a fast pace that even if you develop the talent, you start the talent now without excellent forecasting, in the absence of excellent forecasting, is that the talent will not, when they graduate, they will still have a skills gap. They will not be prepared for that. So hence bridging programs are the only way to provide that capability and help them hit the ground running. And most of the time with the bridging programs, as they demonstrate more and more experience, they're engaged and potentially more employed in that arena. So if you need more information on that, please contact me. I can provide you a lot more details on this information.
Martin, Patricia?
So for us, one of the things, and you asked a really interesting question, because often what we seem to face is a lot of different organizations reaching out to us who seem to have a similar mandate. And I guess one of the things that we're trying to encourage, whether it's Native centers at universities or colleges or other organizations, is to think a little more collaboratively amongst themselves and see if they can, by doing so, create a bit of a multiplier effect or a little more horsepower behind them, because there's only so much capacity within, I can only speak for our company, but every company inherently has its sort of limits on capacity of what they can support, who they can engage with, and some of those sorts of things. We do have bridging programs. We talk to lots of different organizations. We work with a lot of different organizations. But I can certainly say that on the community investment side, we've really encouraged many of the organizations that are coming to us, especially if they're within a region like the Wood Buffalo region in northern Alberta, to think collaboratively and work collaboratively before they come to us. So don't know if that's helpful, a little bit of a different perspective.
Great. Patricia? Okay, next question.
My name's Steve Wilson. My comments are made to Hart, and Imperial is coming to our coast, and they are going to be building a very large liquefied natural gas plant on the coast. And on the coast, we're all related. And even though we may not be within your area that you would consider where you have to consult, with a community like the Haida being very far away from where you're building, if you consider that Aboriginal rights include issues like the right to salmon, the right to halibut, the right to crab, the right to prawns, your operations will greatly impact us because of the migratory nature of those species that are a very important part of our diet and our economics. So my question to you in that context is, how are you going to address the 2% club? Because the majority of First Nations get into a limited partnership agreement, a joint venture partnership, and they get 2% of the net revenue. If you're good at what you do, you'll get 2.5%, maybe 3% of the gross revenue. That's doing pretty good. And then within that umbrella, there are supply chain management issues like early works, construction, and then post-construction. And how are you going to develop capacity knowing that you have the early works, which is really where you should be going, okay, here's the positions that we can allocate to First Nations, now how are we going to fill them? How are we going to use early works and construction to pay for the accreditation? Because the majority of companies in the energy sector do not pay for beginner apprenticeship or first year. And when you've been chronically unemployed, and the unemployment rate on the North Coast is anywhere from 60 to 90%, very high. And so the strategy has to include creating company policy that is going to address those kind of issues. And the final issue is the accreditation. I spoke earlier on the challenges that we have, and in your sector or in the mining sector, there's a lot of very technical jobs that are very good paying, and typically what happens is companies fly people in from everywhere else, and we're on the outside looking in. But you have an opportunity to use early works construction to start to pay for that accreditation so that you're not going to have to fly people in during the operation of your actual project.
Thank you. Hart?
I've got to remember all of the questions. I'll try. First of all, I want to say thank you for your question. We are looking at an opportunity on the west coast of BC, as are a number of other companies, and this is a liquefied natural gas opportunity. To address your first question, we absolutely are very cognizant of the traditional rights, cultures, customs of the communities in which we're working. I would say foundationally our Aboriginal relations strategies, and I mentioned our guiding principles and guidelines earlier, are built on respect. And so we absolutely are aware of, I'll stop first here and just say, these are all new communities for us. Imperial has never worked on the west coast of BC, the northwest coast of BC. So we're learning, and we've spent a lot of time reaching out to communities, both in the Haisla community, the Kitimat region, when we were looking for a potential site there, and now further north in the Prince Rupert area, which is where we're focusing our interest. So yes, we're absolutely cognizant of the marine harvesting rights, the fishing, the importance of fishing to the culture, and we're doing everything that we can to work with First Nations communities to understand that better. With respect to contracting, business development opportunities, all of that, we absolutely want to engage Aboriginal businesses and see if there are opportunities to help nurture or cultivate businesses. It's in our interest to do that. As I said in my comment, we see that as not only helps us get the goods and services and the work done that we need, but also helps to create entrepreneurship and business development within the communities. Now, the way that we typically work is we want to first understand what the communities have in place, what sort of businesses they have, what opportunities may be there. When it comes to if we actually go ahead with this project, it'll be a number of large contracting companies working on our behalf, or if we have partners on our behalf. And the point I want to make is, because of the work that we've already done in other places in the country on large projects, and this would be a very large project, we make it absolutely imperative to these companies that if they want to do business with us, they have to provide to us not only a commitment, but a fully fleshed out strategy for how they're going to work with Aboriginal businesses. That's their ticket to the game. If they can't provide us with that and convince us that they can do that, they won't get our work. There are some components of a project like that that will have to be manufactured elsewhere, but certainly a lot of the, you call it pre-construction, those types of early works, we absolutely have experience with Aboriginal businesses who have done that for us, and we hope to continue to have those kinds of relationships with companies on the West Coast if we decide to move forward. I hope that helps answer your question.
Thank you, Hart. Other questions?
Hi there, my name is Aileen Leo. I work for the Canadian Diabetes Association here in Ottawa. I'm a bit of the exception rather than the rule as a health person rather than a business person, but I'm intrigued by your comment, Patricia, about private businesses helping to fund greenhouses in the north. I think that's a brilliant idea because one of the issues that we're working on at CDA in concert with other Aboriginal organizations and partners is food security, which is a very significant part issue both in rural and remote areas as well as in urban areas in terms of lack of access to traditional food. So I'd like to ask all other participants on the panel your thoughts about that particular idea. I think it's a very intriguing one, and what the potential is for private enterprise not directly involved in food production to be interested in working with Aboriginal groups, Aboriginal communities. A like-minded example is public support through the Aboriginal Diabetes Initiative for a group in Manitoba called Food Matters, which does fabulous work on food security. They have both community garden programs as well as chicken co-op programs in places like Peguis, Garden Hill, and other communities. And in terms of just the economics, much less community resilience, community building aspects of those programs, by the end of the second year, the chicken co-op program, in terms of the price of meat, after all the infrastructure costs were taken care of in the first year, was actually 30 cents lower than the price of meat in the community grocery store. So I'd welcome your thoughts on that.
I love the idea. The idea first came from a conversation that I had when I was living in Toronto, and so I was talking to this company, what they call it, mining consultancy, and so she had a group of folks around her. We were acting like advisors and just throwing out ideas, and I did some research on some of the northern communities, and when I visited northern communities, I saw the price of some of the products, and we see, you know, we've seen it in the news. You know, it's very expensive. $24 for, I think it's a 5-pound bag of potatoes. So whenever we go up, we always bring something with us, you know, a box of apples or something like that, and a whole bunch of Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's what they ask for. With respect to the greenhouses, I know there, and I don't have the name of the company off the top of my head, but there is one project that's underway up north. They're going to be building something. I can find out some information if I get your details, and I can share it with you. And you also mentioned community gardens. I think that's also a really great initiative. I'm from Cowsas First Nation in Saskatchewan, and we had a community garden at Cowsas for a couple of years. And so at the end of the year, that food would then be harvested and handed out to the elders and then others within the community. But I think it's a really great idea. I believe companies are supportive of those kinds of initiatives. You know, within the mining sector, I think when the market gets a little bit better, then there'll be more money to sort of share it with, you know, with those kinds of initiatives.
I think just to follow on that, certainly in some of our experience in the northern Alberta, Fort Chipewyan, or in the Arctic, it is an issue, and it continues to be an issue, and I'm sometimes struck by the dichotomy of having very, call them luxurious, but some are, but very nice work camps that have good food for all of the people that are working there, and yet those in local communities don't have access to the same food. So, you know, we've looked at this before in various ways. I don't think we've come, as a company, we've come on, you know, to a specific landing in terms of trying to nurture a project. But I think it's something that we're going to have to, as we continue to work in more northern communities and in more remote communities, it's something that we're going to have to address, and we're going to have to get some creative thinking going about how we can work with communities, with local regional governments and others in industry to try and address that issue.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to offer a quick question. This is kind of everybody, but Namir, you got me thinking, because you're talking about how quickly the demand is for jobs, right? And how we can't actually, you know, show the job as quickly as it's taken up. Like, I mean, as I've grown up, I've seen, like, you know, the government job banks, you know, which you can go into, but sometimes you apply for the job, like, oh, that was gone 2 weeks ago. You're like, oh, thanks, you know. So they weren't really quick, but they're getting better. And what I was just thinking, because I'm trying to think of what I could do, and I know I'm building a network of knowing young people and a lot of Aboriginal people that are graduating from universities or high school. And I've always thought about this since I was a kid. Now I'm like an idea person too many. I'm like, what's between the workforce and the education system? Like, shouldn't there be some big superstructure that always ensures there's someone to fill each spot, right? And so I figured that, like, social media has kind of been something that's made this a lot more possible. And so what I would offer from my end is, would you be interested in supporting the creation of a youth council organization that pools and records the supply of Indigenous graduates for the hiring needs of business and industry? Because we have the capacity to do that. And if there's such a high demand for young people in the professional industry, we can help supply that and pool the youth from different organizations and like different universities and colleges. Thank you.
That's what I call grassroots innovation. Let's talk. Let's talk.
This microphone is really high. In terms of your roles as liaisons with the Aboriginal community, what role do you play to ensure that these developments are in the best interests of the community in terms of the opportunity costs of resource exploitation versus economies that are more in line with the traditional values of the communities? So for example, ecotourism and cultural tourism, while food harvesting and agriculture.
Well, as I mentioned, I've done a lot of work within the mining sector, so that's, you do often get divided communities. And it's up, I believe, up to the community as much as it is up to the company to start to talk about other opportunities outside of just the mine itself. And our role really is to educate each other. If you go into a meeting with a mining company, they may not, they're pretty focused on developing the mine and extracting the resource. You will have some companies that are a little bit more sensitive, but if you've got an idea within, coming from the community, I think you've got to throw those kinds of things into the conversation too, and put those thoughts into the mind of company executives, so that they start thinking about, yes, we want to do our thing, but how do we also meet the needs and desires of the communities? And so always ask. I think it's up to the company. When I'm representing a company, I want to know what the community wants. I don't go there with this is the plan. So you've got to, I think as a whole, just share ideas across the table and don't let the companies off the hook. Oh, over to you.
Well, I really agree with what Patricia said, and I mentioned earlier we're looking at a potential LNG opportunity on the west coast of BC. We started talking with communities there. We didn't even have a site. We hardly knew where we might want to do what we might want to do, and we just started to talk with communities. And one of the reasons we did that was we wanted to know what the communities had on their mind. Were they interested? Was there issues? Was there opportunities? So just to echo what Patricia said, we always want to hear what the community's interests are. And I worked on the Mackenzie Gas project from about 2000 to 2005. And one of the people we met with was then Premier Kakfui, and we talked a lot about this. And we told him then that if the communities did not want us, we wouldn't do the project. So we don't impose. We take the view that if there's not a desire from the community to want us there, and it's not aligned with their aspirations, then we'll look for other opportunities. But I do think Patricia's right. I think it's incumbent. It's a shared responsibility to talk about these things and to talk about doing them differently if the way that maybe we're thinking of doing something is not aligned with the community. And that all comes down to really good consultation, which I agree with Patricia is really a good ongoing conversation.
I just had a small example about talking. A friend of mine was working up north, up in Iqaluit, and putting in radars for airplanes, and they had to put in a road, and so they consulted with the community. He actually went on the community radio, and he was saying, okay, so we have to put a road in. What do you guys want? So he'd get all kinds of feedback, and one of the things that was kind of repeated a couple of times was, yes, we want the road, and we want you to put the road near the berry patch. So they didn't want to have to crawl over all the rock. They wanted, but not too near, not too close. So you get, you can still do what you want, and the community gets what it wants as well. So just by talking, I think you get an idea of, sort of general satisfaction.
I'm just wondering, just in follow-up really in response to that question,
often before communities know what it is they want, they have to undergo a process of community visioning and comprehensive community planning or strategic planning. So to Hart, I'm just wondering if Imperial Oil has provided resources to communities to undertake that process. And to Patricia, have you done any work on behalf of clients with community planning and community visioning so that they do, from a grassroots perspective, understand what it is they want for their future?
Hart, would you like to take that first?
Sure. Good question. What I find a lot now is that when we get to communities, many of the communities that our company's involved in and I'm engaged with, they've already done that or have started that process. And that's helpful to us. That makes our work easier, to be honest with you, if that work is already underway. And if it's not, you know, we talk with communities about consultation capacity and capacity funding. We do provide that. We do talk about that, and we encourage communities to think about what it is that they want and what their vision is for their communities. And as I say, in a number of the communities, at least in the ones that I've been involved with in Alberta, they've already, by the time we get there, some of them, they've done that kind of planning. So I think it's really important, and I think it's important for us to be aware of that and have access to what it is that, you know, they've learned and what they've documented, but also for government. I think it really helps the regulators too.
Yeah, I found that a lot of communities also have done some thinking around it. You know, whether it's, they may not have formalized it always. You know, when I talked to some folks in Attawapiskat about, you know, about housing and about moving the housing, and they said, well, you know, we'd like to have it in spot X. And so there's been some discussion, but I've never seen it formalized, and you never really see this come out. There's just constant talk about their houses. In other, you know, in BC, I was also talking about housing development, and so they already have, in some of the First Nations already have an idea of where they want the houses to be, where they want to have a business park development. In others in Northern Ontario, they've, with them, when I've gone up on behalf of mining clients, they've talked about where they would like to have cottages, and they've talked a bit about, you know, that kind of sort of hunting camp kinds of things, and you know, in situations where there's an interest on the part of a community to have camp and cottages, a company will often then say, well, let us build the camps, we'll rent them from you, we'll give them to you, we'll rent them from you, and then you have them when we leave. And so I think those kinds of things, you know, are relatively easy to work out.
Thank you. Other comments? I have a question I'd just like to explore with you. We have just about 5 minutes left, and I guess this is for Namir and Patricia. There's a wonderful anthropologist, Wade Davis, who I'm sure many of you have read his book, The Wayfinders, and he talks about the loss of language, which is inextricably linked to culture. And he says that in our world today we have about 7,000 languages, and we're losing them at an alarming rate. And in our lifetime, about half of those languages would disappear. I am really curious, I guess, Namir, first of all, and then Patricia. I can't help but think that technology has to play some sort of impactful role in language preservation. And Patricia, we know that in our culture, our children perform best in school and learn best when they are connected to their culture. Science, technology, reading, writing, everything is linked to that. I wonder if you could make some comment on the high-tech industry and what role it can play in this.
I think their spoken language and preservation of that, and I think it's an important dimension. It's one that is in Canada and abroad as well. I mean, in terms of technologies, there's certainly a lot of potential out there to actually capitalize on this and build on that. I can cite several technologies that could do that, but I think one is harnessing that, the language. The other part is, more importantly, is teaching it and being able to exchange with it, rationalize, because again, any interaction, any education is a social interaction. It's about rationalization. It's about, so, it's got to be beyond the technology, and I find that there are a lot of technologies, in fact, that we're using, and increasingly, because of the fast pace of technology evolution, we are, as much as other countries, are looking at, well, how do we build technologies that help lifelong learning, meaning peer-to-peer pedagogy in a way, or exchange of information. And I think beyond the technology to preserve it, it's the technology that we need to look at is how do we exchange it, how do we make sure that there is a peer interaction, there is a rationalization of that language, an understanding of it, and building on it. So there are technologies to do that, answer to your question, but I think we have to create those communities. But there is another question that comes to play here, is that, you build that within the community. We have to also build the digital skills to be able to use those capabilities associated.
Thank you. Well, when I was teaching at university, even though I was teaching adults, I always wanted it to be fun. And so often it was more than just writing papers. You could paint a picture that talked about a number of cases that came out of the Supreme Court that had relevance to Aboriginal peoples, and poetry and lots of really interesting things that demonstrate the students' knowledge of the course. And so with children or with learning languages, you definitely have to start young, and I think that it needs to be all, you don't want to be too serious with kids, and it's got to be play. And you develop a technology that kids can use. They can either use it to interact with one another, or they're by themselves at a desk. But I think it's got to be interesting and fun, and not too much pressure, because kids will learn really quickly just by enjoying and just by doing. And I think that if we start young, we have a fun technology. They love computer games. I think that would be a great opportunity.
Maybe just to add to that, actually, we have potentially an example that we can use. Recently, we partnered with, as part of our program in the schooling, we wanted to engage in the schools in the creative thinking and the creative industry, the media and entertainment and so forth. And we partnered with Canada Media Fund on a small pilot initiative, telling Canadian stories, engaging youth at grade 11 and 12, telling Canadian stories leveraging augmented reality, meaning that you can use an iPad or a mobile device, and because it has a camera on it and it has a voice command, you can actually interact with the character in the storyline. So you're not watching almost a story pass in front of you as an experience. You're interacting with the character. You can stop and ask questions of a person. So hence the learning part is much more experiential associated with it. So potentially there are a lot of technologies that could be used for that.
What a great idea, and Patricia, to your point, it makes learning interesting and exciting. Patricia Stirbys, Namir Anani, and Searle, thank you so much for your intellect and enriching this conversation. It is just a little after 2:15. We're going to reconvene promptly at 2:30. Refreshments are outside, and we'll see you back here in 15 minutes.